Hi guys, this is Greg Jones, and today I'm going to be presenting an exclusive classroom video on sit and goes called 9-Man Sit and Goes from Scratch. For those of you who don't know me, I play under the screen name ZeroSum79 on Full Tilt and Poker Stars, and I specialize teaching micro-stakes players how to crush low-limit, single-table, and multi-table sit and goes. The purpose of this video is to train single-table and multi-table sit and go players how to analyze tournament structures. There are many benefits to being able to analyze a sit and go structure. In poker, we can get a big edge on our opponents by making less mistakes than they do. And in tournaments, this typically involves adjusting the structures better than our opponents. So from the sit and go analysis, we can learn how and when to change gears to optimize our play. And also, when a new structure pops up on the internet, we can learn how to adjust for that structure as well. So the goal of this video is to learn how to identify and adjust to new tournament structures. It's a well-known cliche, but it's true, that hard decisions in a poker hand typically come from mistakes that were made on previous streets of the hand. Sit and goes are the compilation of many hands, and therefore in sit and goes many times tough problems are rooted in earlier mistakes in the tournament. Two areas of concern in sit and goes tend to be bubble play and heads-up play. And for low-limit players, they tend to make mistakes earlier in the tournament that exacerbate their problems in these two areas later on. Many times, success in these areas is not due to how we play on the bubble or in heads-up itself, but rather earlier in the tournament. So what we find is that sometimes solving sit and go problems requires looking at the play of hands previous to the problems in the tournament. Alright, this is the finished distribution of a low ROI player, a break-even or slightly winning player. Typically, there's a large bump in the distribution around third place. And this is because typically the first thing that sit and go players learn about correct play is how to play tightly. And typically this is also the last thing that many of them learn how to play. So what you can see is that this break-even player is finishing in the money about 41% of the time. You can see that the numbers above the bar graph basically tell you the percentage of time they finish in each place. And they're finishing the money about 41% of the time, and on average they're making about 40 cents per tournament. So their return on investment is about 3%. Now a high ROI player has a fairly different looking finish distribution. Typically they have a large bump up in their finishes around 5th and 6th place, but then the finishes trail off in 4th place, and then they have a decent amount of in-the-money finishes, with 1st place being the highest, 3rd place being the 2nd highest, and 2nd place being the 3rd highest. So you'll notice that their in-the-money percentage is slightly less, 39%, than the break-even players, but that the average amount of money they're making per tournament is $1.20. And that the return on their investment is 10%. So, typical questions that I get from a break-even player are, what is wrong with my bubble play, and what's wrong with my heads-up play? Because they're finishing on the bubble quite a lot, and they're not getting very many first-place finishes. They see that they're bubbling out a lot, so they think there's something wrong with the way they're playing the bubble. And they see that they're finishing in 2nd place quite a lot more often than they're finishing in 1st place, so they believe that they're playing wrong heads up. And the problem is that they're actually asking the wrong questions. So, typically in a sit and go, at around the 75-150 level, we can no longer open raise. If we start with a chip stack of around 1,500 chips, then min-raising to 300 chips commits about 20% of our chip stack. So the best option becomes to shove all in. And this is a well-understood thing in sit and goes, where basically around 10 blinds deep we should be open shoving rather than open raising. Turns out that sit and go success is tied to 3 basic skills at the low limits: open shoving wide enough from the small blind and button, proper re-stealing, and proper calling of all-in shoves. And all 3 of these things tend to start to happen around 5 to 7-handed. In future videos we're going to be discussing each of these situations in much more depth, but for now we're going to just take a look at the fact that open shoving tends to happen around 5 to 7-handed. And so 5 to 7-handed is where good players are taking most of their risks in the sit and go. Now let's take a look at the finished distribution and payouts of an average 9-man sit and go on the internet. The first three finishing places pay money. 50% to the first place finisher, 30% to the second place finisher, and 20% to the third place finisher. So in an $11 sit and go, there's a $99 prize pool, which we can approximate as $100. And therefore we can see that typically the first place pays $50, second place pays $30, and third place pays $20 in an 11+1 tournament. So there's a $20 increase in payout for the player who finishes third rather than fourth. And there's a $10 increase in payout for the player who finishes second rather than third. And there's a $20 increase in payouts for the player who finishes first rather than second. So what we can see from this structure of the tournament is that we can be very interested in getting from third to third place rather than finishing in fourth. And that we should be somewhat interested in finishing in second place rather than finishing third. And then again, we should be very interested in getting a first place finish rather than a second. So good players are busy accumulating chips 5 to 7 handed, and that's well before the bubble. So that basically they've doubled their chip stack prior to the bubble, and they're no longer in jeopardy of busting out in fourth place, and therefore they're able to get that first big payout bump of $20. The pay bump at $20 is large between fourth and third place, so we don't want to bust in fourth. And what you'll see is that by accumulating chips at the right time in fifth and sixth place, we don't have to take very many risks on the bubble, because a good player is either going to bust in fifth place, or they're going to have a comfortable chip stack because they doubled their chips to 3,000. Now, once we get in the money, the pay bump between third and second place is relatively small. So therefore, we can be less risk averse, and we can be working again accumulating chips. Because accumulating chips at the right time in third place, with three-handed, allows us to dominate when we're two-handed and heads up. So basically, a good player is going to realize that that $10 pay bump is not enough of an incentive to stop playing aggressively when three-handed. And therefore, three-handed, they're going to be accumulating chips for heads-up play. And you can see that a good player is going to bust out more often in third place than they are in second place. So let's take a look at an average situation where 3 players remain in the tournament and the blind levels are at 200, 400. The average player stack is going to be about 4,500 chips. That's just the total number of chips divided by 3. And a good player is going to be motivated to get the big pay bump from second to first place. So therefore, they're not going to be risk averse, trying to lock up the small pay bump between third and second place. If they're playing properly, they'll be taking risks to double up before another opponent does. So that when they go into heads up, they're going to have 9,000 chips. They're going to have their stack plus somebody else's stack. And they're going to be against somebody who has half as many chips as they do. And they're going to have an extreme advantage. That's because heads up with a chip lead, the chip leader only needs to double up once with an all-in, while their opponent needs to win 2 all-ins. So good players are going to win heads up more often by accumulating a massive chip lead while still three-handed when they should not be risk averse. And so it turns out that a bad player typically is going to have problems heads up because typically they're going to go into heads up play with a massive chip deficit, not because they're playing heads up incorrectly. So, in conclusion, we've learned quite a few things in quite a short period of time. Typically, we can learn a lot about proper tournament play from taking a look at the structure combined with common situations. The pay structure dictates when to be aggressive and be accumulating chips, and when to be risk averse and staying out of trouble. Many times in sit and goes, our problems are not due to problems that we're having with a specific hand, but are actually rooted in earlier mistakes in the tournament. And we find that by looking at winning players' finish distributions, we can learn a lot about how they're playing without ever even watching them play a single hand. So here's a teaser for another video. What about in 18-man structures? The payout structure is 40%, 30%, 20%, and 10%. What do we expect our finish percentages to look like? And also, what does this pay structure tell us about how risk-averse we should be early in the tournament compared to a 9-man structure? What does this tell us about when we should be shifting gears in the tournament? And what does this tell us about the fact that we need to double up 2 times to get to the bubble rather than just 1? So I hope you've enjoyed my video. Good luck at the tables. This is Zero Sum 79 signing out.